systems can be dismantled. Systems throughout history have been dismantled. So when we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about systems. That's different than the ideology of racism itself. Racism is the ideology. Systemic racism is the system that would perpetuate that ideology.
First thing, I found that there's no actual definition for it. And then when people begin to define systemic racism for me, they give me analogies. And here's the thing though. All 40 people had a different variation of what systemic racism is supposed to be.
I feel like it's kind of intellectually dishonest to be like, if other people can't define something for me in a way that I see fit, then somehow I mean it don't exist. It's like, right. I just don't think that's a fair assessment, and it's not giving enough credit to the fact that a lot of times people don't have the words to actually intellectualize what's going on.
The only place where I can say that I do see systemic racism is in the criminal justice system. How a black man, or 19 times, I believe that was the actual statistic, to be sentenced longer than white counterparts.
I'll get right into it.
Well, I guess I'll go, man. I'm Henry, man. I'm a musician. Well, you don't want to know all that. I'm Henry. I'm a conservative. I'm here, man, to just have a really good conversation, and hopefully our people can be uplifted from the conversation.
Dante in Georgia, conservative. Same thing, piggyback off what Henry said. I hope this conversation is solution-based and just to hear each other out.
Is it my turn? Okay, I'm Rashad Roberts. Got an undergraduate degree, University of Arkansas at Little Rock in political science. I'm currently a candidate for a Juris Doctorate at the FAMU College of Law. I don't know if I have a label for what I am. I just know that I'm willing to try just a lot of things, that help Black people. That's my ideology, Black people, right? So some of my views may be extremely liberal, while others might be moderately conservative. But I'm getting in my car. You guys gotta excuse me. But yeah, that's just my mantra. I have things that I like both from the left and the right, and things that I just despise from the left and the right. But yeah, that's who I am.
Rashad, you just educated me. I did not know FAMU had a law school.
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
Is that new? I thought they were popular for business.
Well, the law school first kicked off in 1947, and then because of racial animus, it got shut down in the 1950s, and then the Florida House and Senate approved to have it reopened in the year 2000, and then it officially reopened in 2002. So
they really don't even talk about it though. But you just educated me. I did not know that.
Yep.
It's good to know.
I seen the surprise look in your face. I was like, oh, damn, you okay? Which is something that should be celebrated, to be completely honest. Just talk about it. So
family for the band.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and
oh yeah.
So actually, what made you put your video up as systemic?
What did make me put that video up? I remember being out on the lake, man, but I think if there's anything that inspired any of the things that I say nowadays, it's just the fact that I am tired of seeing the trick being played on Black people. And this is just one of them. Oh, no, I know what it was. I saw a Don Lemon. That's what it was. I saw Don Lemon telling Black people how oppressed they were, and dude's a millionaire. He got a mansion in New York, in Chicago.
Married to a white man.
And where?
He's married to a white man.
So I just I started to look at all the people who really push this idea on Black people, and they're all really wealthy people. It's kind of like a oxymoron, if you will. It's like these people, you know, they're wealthy, and they're telling, you know, regular people, you know, like me, who will probably subscribe to their trash news network, that Black people are so oppressed by systematic racism and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, it's just really a lie. It's not real. I would agree that there's such thing as favoritism, but there's no system that's keeping Black people from being successful. If there is, I'm wondering where's the system when all the Black people become successful.
Thompson, how you feel? Thompson, how you feel?
And that was my question in the last debate, by the way. It didn't get answered, but, you know, where's the system when Black people, you know, are being successful?
So how do you feel about that, Thompson?
I mean, I definitely agree with Henry. Unfortunately, these news pundits who get on TV or radio, they play into Black people grievance. And they use that to drive up ratings. And they don't talk about the real issues that's going on in the Black community. They don't talk about father absence. They don't talk about abortion. I know people get a little on the fence when we talk about Black on Black crime, because they say, you know, we have white on white crime and Hispanic on crime. I think saying stuff like that to a Black person, yeah, I care about all lives. I mean, I'm a pro-lifer, but as a Black person, I'm talking about the things that I see affecting my people. So I would like to talk about Black on Black crime. And if you tell that to people who are living in crime predominantly areas, they want to talk about crimes too. They actually ask for more policing. If Don Lemon or any of these celebrities who get on TV and they get pulled over by the police officers, I guarantee you they're going to do exactly what that police officer say. And then the next day they're going to get on TV and say how that police officer was racist or so on and so forth. So they're going to follow what the police officer says, and you know, they're not going to resist arrest. In some cases, I do believe that police are using force excessively, but I don't want that to be like that's every single case. If you watch these videos, if a police officer tell you to put your hands behind your back, regardless if you agree with it or not, you have to put your hands behind your back. Your time to fight is not on the streets, because it can go far left or it can be, you know, simple. You do what the police officers say. Your time to fight is in court. And if we continue to, and my main thing right now is what are we telling our next generation? Because no offense to you, Rashad, I saw you know, you're pro Black Lives Matter movement, and I get that. But what are we telling our next generation? Because anytime I see Black Lives Matter, the movement come out, more Black people seem to be hurt by it. And if we're not having these serious conversations, then I don't know what we as Black people are trying to accomplish. And then we also have to be very mindful, like Henry said, when do people start talking about systematic racism? It's during the general election. It's always during a general election. And you have to be very, you know, you have to be very cautious of when they do these type of things. Because I guarantee you right now, if you look at, we can use Don Lemon as an example. Ask him how many Black people he have employed. I guarantee you he has a lot of more white people employed. But, you know, is he going to call that systematic racism? Or is he going to talk about, you know, father absence, how some Black males don't respect authority? Is he going to talk about poor education? And the list can go on.
Sean, how you feel?
Okay, I actually have a lot to say, actually. So I want to start with questions, because I like to use the Socratic method to better understand and to better gauge where people are actually coming from. So my first question to both gentlemen, I think they both mentioned abortion, and they both mentioned Black on Black crime. With abortion, do you guys believe that the disproportionate rates in which the African American community obtains abortions is rooted in eugenics? It's a yes or no question.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's a form of systemic racism. Eugenics is a form of systemic racism. And here's why I say that, right? When you have an ideology that can enter into one of the sectors of our lives, right? That has an impact on how we live, right? And I'm talking about the medical sector to be a little bit more precise, right? So what I'll also add to that is when we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about more than just our government, right? We're talking about many sectors that exist within this country, right? And one of the ways in which I always argue that systemic racism exists is with eugenics and how it has seeped, it's always been a part of our medical industry. I have another question for you guys as far as guns are concerned, because I am pro Second Amendment. Do you, hold on one second, guys.
Oh, we lost him.
No, I think.
Oh man, can I respond to the eugenics?
Go ahead.
Were you fixing to respond to that?
Nah, go ahead.
All right. Well, thing is, I know I don't think there's been a lot of research, in-depth research eugenics, because on the surface, when we hear about eugenics, we think that it's
hold on, because he came back. There it is.
I am so sorry, guys.
You're okay.
I did not mean to blank out. But back to my point. Like I said, I'm pro Second Amendment. Do you guys believe that there is a history of racism in general with keeping African Americans from owning guns, if there is any?
I don't.
Can you ask your question differently?
Do you guys believe that our government, in any way, shape, or form, has actively worked to prevent Black gun ownership?
I mean, if you're talking like back then, yeah. Right now, I think they don't want anybody to have guns. The left, that is.
I feel like America's been criminalized a lot more whenever you see blacks with guns. But go ahead. My fault. Go ahead.
And that's how sneaky this is, right? So it's clear we can point to back then, and we can acknowledge how, state governments like California prevented, the Black Panther Party from owning guns by passing laws because they felt threatened by the Black Panther Party, and the NRA actually backed those laws. But now it's something a little bit more covert, a little bit more insidious, and I think it's something that the left perpetuates. And I think we don't talk about it enough, where we create this boogeyman, right? And that boogeyman is a Black man. And then we talk about crime, right? The left always says, well, Republicans always talk about Chicago like it's crime ridden or something like that. But the left doesn't acknowledge how they talk about gun violence and how they disproportionately, associate gun violence with African American culture too, right? And that's what they, weaponize as one of the reasons for, needing gun control or stricter gun laws, because look at Chicago, right? I mean, it's a lot more insidious, a lot more covert, and not discussed as much as, the right's problematic rhetoric surrounding Chicago, which is talked about a lot more than what the left discusses. So I after asking those questions, I want to add to that even more. When you look into our judicial system, when you look into our legal system, right? Now I'm going to make the argument that, there is systemic racism within our judicial system. I want you guys, when you guys get the chance, look up a case called Johnson v. Mintosh. And this isn't even pertaining to Black people, right? The Americans and property rights. So in this case, the court basically ruled that Native Americans cannot own land simply because they had no religion and they were not a civilized people, and that they didn't have a resourceful means of using the land as compared to the settlers, right? So the ruling in that case is rooted in the idea that these people are lesser and uncivilized, and we can't allow them to own land. It's our land. Like that is a foundation of systemic racism. It is systemic racism when you have, you know, things codified in law. All right. So another case, a landmark case I would point to that actually deals with Black people that I think you guys should look up is Shelley v. Kramer. And it was argued by then attorney Thurgood Marshall in front of the Supreme Court. I believe it was 1947. This case dealt with a racially restrictive covenant in a neighborhood, right? So there was a homeowners association, and they had a racially restrictive covenant in a neighborhood, and the Black people were suing because they're like, well, the state is enforcing this racially restrictive covenant. It was in the state of Missouri, if I'm still remembering correctly. And here's how sneaky the Supreme Court is, right? They said that no state shall enforce a racially restrictive covenant. What the Supreme Court did not say was that homeowners associations couldn't enforce racially restrictive covenants. So that's why you still had things like redlining back in the day, right? So long as the state didn't step in and enforce it, it was cool. But once the state got involved, right, by upholding, you know, these policies through the judiciary or you know, the legislature or whatever, then it becomes a problem, right? So it's not always what the Supreme Court says; it's what they don't say that you know can effectuate systemic racism, right? So keep in mind, that's my premise, right? Systemic racism not only exists within our judiciary, it exists within our legislature, it exists within our medical sector, within our lives. Like it's and what we don't want to get into the practice of is saying, well, just because we have, I haven't experienced myself, or there are successful Black people, then there can't be systemic racism, right? What we would look at you guys as is the exception and not the general rule, right? How many more Black people can attest to experiencing systemic racism versus the amount of Black people who are successful, right, or who haven't experienced it? And I would also assert that the presumption of Black success does not negate, you know, systemic racism, because how do we know what Black people had to do in order to get to that success? How do we know that they didn't have to work substantially harder than any other group or racial group to obtain that success, right? So, and the answer is we don't know unless they share it with us, right? So we can't presume that their success negates the reality of systemic racism. And to the Black on Black crime, it's if you've ever heard of the logical fallacy called a red herring, it's a distraction, right? It's a truth that's used as a deflection, right? So no one will say that Black on Black crime isn't true. But the only time Black on Black crime arguments typically come up is when we're addressing, you know, a government or your state or local or national governments who have espoused that they are responsible for being servants and protectors of their people. And when they fail to meet that duty, and we call that to their attention, in particular when it comes to Black people, the retort is, well, look at what's happening in Chicago, or look at what's happening in Atlanta, or look at what's happening in it's not false, but the underlying intent in bringing that up is to deflect. It's a red herring, logical fallacy, right? I think I got all out what I had to say because my head's all over the place. I have a lot up here, but yeah, I am of the position that systemic racism is real.
Okay, so AJ, what was you saying about eugenics real quick before he looked out?
Yeah, eugenics, man. Have you scraped around it? Have you really dug into that? Because
I actually have dug into it a lot. We look at sterilization of Black women that even still occurs today in California. It's still pretty recent. When you I know you guys might not be on the pro-choice end, but it's more of a pro-choice issue where Black women who are prisoners, right? They are sterilized. And this has been a thing since before the 1950s, right? So and that's state action, right? You're dealing with state prison. That's state action, right? That is action at the hands of our government. That is a system, right? And we don't talk enough about that. We talk about Planned Parenthood. You know, look at where these centers are strategically placed. Now, the argument from the left when it comes to Planned Parenthood is, well, poor women who are typically tend to be women of color don't have the same kind of access to health care that white women may have or Hispanic women might have. But my retort to that is, well, what services are you providing more to women of color versus other racial groups? A woman of color is more likely to get an abortion as compared to her Anglo counterpart. So that's strategically placed. Planned Parenthood does receive government funding. That is our government. That is state action right there, right? And if you argue that eugenics is rooted in anti-Blackness or rooted in hate of poor people or hate of handicapped people, then you have to acknowledge that it's our government that's doing this, and our government is a system, and that's really what systemic racism is. It's a government's ability to effectuate racist ideas and policies on people who might not have all the means to stand up against it or get around it.
But the reason I asked was because I feel like with enough of the digging that I've done in terms of eugenics, it's a race thing, but it's kind of not at the same time. It's the preservation of a particular bloodline. Now we somehow, because these people are white-skinned people, we take that eugenics is a favorable white thing, and it's the genocide of Black people, which that part is actually true. But this is more spiritual than it is political, because they have an agenda for white people as well. So, but I know that that's not a conversation we could fully have here, because if we do, we go straight all the way from
that addresses to poor people, right? So it's poor white people.
Not just poor people is not what I'm saying. See, this is a bloodline that's even disassociated or different from white people. White skin is sort of like me, and this is my belief. I believe that I'm a Black person, but I'm not African. Like but we have the same complexion. Same thing with this eugenical thing. These people have white skin, but they're not the typical white people that we're talking about. They got a plan for them, just like they have for these brown skinned people. And it's more spiritual than it is political. So that's why I asked you, how much have you actually dug into the eugenics? Because if we deal with eugenics strictly political, then we'll just see the politics in it. But this right here,
that's my first degree, so
I dig, bro, and you sound very knowledgeable. So hats off, man.
Thompson, you feeling the way? I see your eyebrows going up and down. So at any point did you
No, well, my question, really to Rashad, do you think Black people have the same opportunities that everybody else?
No.
Why do you think that?
It's abundantly clear that Black people historically and even currently have never just had the exact same opportunities as other racial groups in this country. So again, I go back to redlining and I go back to education, right? So I'll use college education, for example, right? And I'll talk about the GI Bill. when you look at college education, when you keep generations of Black people from obtaining a college education for so long, and then you finally, by law, allow, the integration of education, and you allow them to have a shot at the same education as white people, right? There's still what hasn't been compensated for is years and generations of lack, right? So it's like we're playing catch up while trying to maintain a certain level that's equivalent to that of our white counterparts or even our Asian counterparts in this country. I remember looking at rejection letters to Black students, from the University of Mississippi State, what was it, Georgia, even Yale, and it's really a lot, and that's just in the education sector. When we get into public education, K through 12, integration really didn't happen until, people say it was the 60s, but no, it was the 70s and 80s when we started busing, right? So kids could, get to different schools that had, better resources and like better zip codes. When we look at that, when you look at schools who are typically not as resourceful or lack, resources, they're typically embedded within communities of color, right? And why is that, right? Look at property taxes, right? Look at more affluent white neighborhoods that were developed out of, systems of white flight, right? When integration started happening, just look here in Central Arkansas, for example, right? Pulaski County Special School District, integration happened. White parents started moving, up until the West Little Rock area, and that left, communities of color who were traditionally poor, right? Didn't own a lot. So you're not going to generate a lot of property taxes or other forms of revenue to help your educational system. So now you're at a financial or economic disadvantage. So you're not able to be as resourceful in your education as a more affluent white community is who does have those resources. And even when you look at lending practices, again, that's redlining, that's predatory lending, that's God damn it, I forgot the term.
Would you give somebody money that you know they can't pay you back?
Actually, no. But here's why I say predatory lending, right? That's why we had the one of the crises, the housing crisis, right? Predatory lending was what caused that, right? Black people were given loans that banks knew that they couldn't pay back, right? And there's been like whole litigation and lawsuits, even in the Supreme Court, about it. So no, typically you in a capitalist system, you wouldn't give these people a loan because they don't have a history of credit, they don't have any assets, they don't have any capital, they don't have any of that in a capitalist, system. But what was happening is they were given the loans. So I get the sentiment, but look at history. Like, it just doesn't track.
Would you apply for something that you know you can't pay back?
Huh?
Would you personally, would you apply for something that you know you can't pay back?
You're presuming that someone is financially literate enough to know that they can't pay this back. If I'm a banker or a teller or a person who's lending or a realtor, I'm smooth enough to convince a person that, okay, all you need to do is make these minimal payments over this expansive period of time, and then you'll be done. They know that there are a lot of loopholes in the contracts, right? I'm really good at contract law too, so now we're getting into contract law. But they know that there are a lot of loopholes in how they write these contracts, and then oftentimes the contracts are unconscionable, and a layman is not able to make out, what's put into the contracts, nor are they able to afford the legal counsel to be able to tell them, hey, this contract is not something you would probably agree to looking at, your position. They told you that, yeah, make these minimal payments over this amount of time and it'll be fine. But did you read the the circumvention clauses? Did you read clauses that say, okay, you know, if you buy this property and you buy another property from us, you have to finish paying off both properties before we can, you know, let you have it all. And if you only finish paying off one property, but you fail to finish paying off the other property, we're not going to let you have any of the property, right? There have been contracts like that, and it's ridiculous. I forgot the name of the Supreme Court case.
Do you believe black people have the intelligence to read a contract and understand it?
They do if they're educated. A layman cannot read a typical legal contract. I will put a contract in front of you, a typical contract, a realtor contract in front of you, and there are going to be some things that you would have to ask me as a person who's trained in the law to articulate what that means. And that's
does it make it unfair though?
Huh?
Exactly.
Does that make it unfair just because?
Yes,
because,
it does. It does.
Why?
It does.
Do you know we all signed a virtual contract when we download Uber?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and do you think everybody knows that?
No.
But when does it come back to personal responsibility?
No. So there's a principle in contract law called unconscionability, right? So it's an equity claim. It's a claim in equity. So you have claims in law and you have claims in equity, right? So a claim in equity, right, is a claim of unconscionability, right? And you have two forms of unconscionability: procedural unconscionability and substantive unconscionability, right? A contract is unconscionable when the terms, the substantive terms in the contract are substantially unfair, right? You have procedural unconscionability when you have oppressive forms of contract drafting that are atypical of contracts, and you can gauge that by looking at what a typical contract for, you know, that type of industry is, right? So yes, it is a person's responsibility to read the contract, but we got to keep in mind, a layman, I don't care what race you are, a layman cannot understand everything that are put in legal contracts. So I think it's you know.
What do we say to black banks that also turn down black people because they know they can't pay back?
Well, that's not based on their race, though.
Why would someone sign a contract they couldn't understand? I wouldn't.
I mean,
I wouldn't either.
But people do it all the time.
It's called desperation.
I get the question you're asking. I totally get the question you're asking, and it logically that makes sense. But we got to understand what that person is. I totally get it. And it does make sense. But let's be honest. Like, not everybody understands certain things in contracts, because there's certain things that I don't understand. Where I'm like, hold on, let me Google this, or let me get back to somebody I know that can help me, you know, because it sounds fishy, but once again, let me check. And I think what happened is we get people that are in desperate situations. They're like, okay, let me go ahead and do this because it sounds good. And I mean, primarily, sometimes it's not just a race thing. Sometimes it's a class thing where you got preying on both people.
Exactly.
In most cases, I see it's African Americans that get jammed up on it.
Look at cash advances. Predominantly African Americans are targeted with payday loans, and it's, boy, I could give an entire semester class over this shit, because it's, well, excuse my language, but I could give a class over this shit. Like, it's because, you know, we know who poverty is synonymous with in the United States. Poverty is synonymous with African Americans, and it's, you know, you've gone hundreds of years of unpaid labor, and then you set them free.
What about
they don't have
what about black Americans who spend $1 trillion a year?
That's collectively.
That is collectively, but we spend
where does that spending power come from? Ask yourself that. Where does that spending power come from? Predominantly.
What do you mean?
I mean, where do African Americans get the means to spend, right? What does their ability typically come from to spend collectively at $1.3 or $1.4 trillion?
I'm trying to figure out why would that matter though, because they're spending it.
It matters because, okay, I'll put it this way to you. If you get a lot of African Americans who may receive government assistance in some form, that might not be their main source of income, that is also calculated into it, right? They receive the government assistance and then they spend it. You juxtapose that with their ability to produce. It's not like they're spending it because they have their own businesses or you know they own everything in their communities. Like, it's some of it might be that, but a lot of it is, okay, some African Americans in some way, shape, or form might receive some form of government assistance. That's a part of the spending power, and that has to be calculated in there.
I don't get it, man. You know, they're spending the money, and even like if we're going to use that, because see, these are the same people who are lined up buying Jordans as well. You know, so I don't think that, I don't know how that factors into it. Matter. They're spending the money.
Well, the
apparently
question was posed to me about their spending power.
What's that?
The question was posed to me regarding African American spending power, and I'm not sure what the presumption with that is with that question. So I wanted to clarify that not all the spending power comes from their own ability to be a producer. So
I think what y'all saying pretty much, they're spending it. They just spend a lot. They should spend a lot fucking better versus buying bullshit.
Well, they're not starting their own businesses.
correct.
They're not starting their own businesses. They're not investing in themselves or their family's future. As Henry pointed out, unfortunately, when some of Black people do get money, we buy Jordans, we buy clothes. It's important for us to look wealthy, but it's not important for us to plan for the future, so we can leave a generation of wealth.
Doesn't that come with financial literacy and access to the education to obtain that financial literacy?
Man, that sounds like an excuse to me, bro. And there's no offense.
Let me ask Rashad this: how do you think we resolve? And I just want to put out front. You probably already know I disagree with systematic racism, but in your opinion, how do you? Two questions: how do you resolve systematic racism, and how do you resolve racism?
Well, I do believe racism is an ism that is constructed, right? Socially, it's not something that's easy for anyone to resolve, quote unquote. But because something is hard to challenge or hard to combat, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be combated, right? Now, when it comes to systemic, right, systems can be dismantled. Systems throughout history have been dismantled. So when we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about systems. That's different than the ideology of racism itself. Racism is the ideology. Systemic racism is the system that would perpetuate that ideology, right? And ideology is nothing if no one has the power to effectuate it. Right? I can believe that I'm better than whatever race there is out there, but if I don't have the means or the power or the institutions to effectuate that, then what is my ideology? It's just nothing more than just an idea, right? It's an idea that I'm just better than somebody else. So that's not something that's a gimme. Here's how you do it really quick. It takes a, what's going on, man? It takes a multifaceted, approach where you attack the systems that perpetuate it, and you have conversations about ideology. You have it in your academic institutions. You have it in your financial institutions. You have it in your medical institutions. It's hard. It's really, really hard. It's not easy work at all. And for people, who decide to take up that mantle and make that fight, my hat's off to them because it's something I've been doing for a while, and there have been strides made, but we're still not where we need to be. And the question is, will we
What does
ever
the
get
end
there?
goal look like to you? When you say we're not where we should be, what does that end goal look like to
Equity. The end goal is equity. People say equality. Yes. Once you get equity, then you can have equality. So the ultimate end goal is always equality, but you'll never get there without equity.
So I see you shaking your head, SJ. What do you mean? What's the shaking?
I feel like the answer to Dante's question, which, you know, is simple, is actually not hard. I think that Black people need to become better, get in better positions, which you have that opportunity because these guys are going to graduate law school and to develop better relationships with the people in the position so that collectively we can create that change. It ain't hard, you know, and I know
Oh,
that
yes,
because,
it is.
well, if that's the case, man, well, I'm looking at my own situation. Let me say it like that.
Yeah.
If I need to buy a house right now, guess what? I got a friend that's a manager of the bank that can help me get that accomplished. And I have this for several other aspects of my life. See, this is doable, this is possible, but the problem is Black people are buying the lie that we can't get in positions to make effective change, that we're oppressed, that there's a white man that's stopping us from going to the next level in our life. It's a lie because there's too many people who have enough network, because this is the only thing that white people do. It looks so overwhelming because the population of white people, there's so much more of them than there is us. But it's the same. They're just
Dangerous trope.
to those people because maybe they're their buddies, maybe they're friends, maybe they actually have a long-term relationship with them. But I don't feel like their agenda is to make sure that Black people don't come up. I think they're just doing what any typical person would do. I'm gonna look out for my homie.
So when you got a bunch of, you know, white people saying, I'm looking out for my homie, and they're the predominant group in this country, what happens? Also, I don't want to perpetuate a dangerous racial trope that gives us the presumption that all Black people believe that we're oppressed and we can't make it. If we didn't believe we couldn't make it, people like me wouldn't be fighting every day. So I think we don't want to perpetuate that presumption. What we're saying is it shouldn't be substantially harder for us.
What's wrong with a challenge?
To be successful, don't you
No,
have
to? No. That's dangerous. We're not going to say what's wrong with the challenge. I don't mind a challenge. I don't want a challenge that's rooted in my race. I don't want a challenge that's against me because of some stereotypes or some tropes that are, you know, generated about me. Like, no. That's not a challenge that should be a thing. Now, a challenge to work hard and, you know, build your own, if everybody has equity and equality, that's different. I'm okay with that. Challenges are fun. They make you better. They make you stronger. I've been in the Army. I've pledged fraternities. I know what a challenge is. But none of those challenges are rooted in my race. That's what we're attacking. So
I guess I don't see it, man. I don't see what you're. It doesn't seem like that Black people are having to do on a basic level now. I'm not talking about for spoil system and favoritism, but on a basic level of achievement, it doesn't seem like Black people are having to do anything that white people aren't having to do.
You yourself spoke to connections.
Yeah.
Connections are on a macro level what perpetuate this. If a lot of Black people don't have these connections, you know, and a lot of these connections are also historical, right? So no, it doesn't add up. It doesn't track. How do you reconcile this idea of connections, and even when they are historical, and then turn around and say, well, I don't see what Black people are having to do that white people aren't having to do, when the dominant group has had these connections for generations, and we haven't had those connections that they've had because there have been these ideas that we were not human or we were a lesser group.
What do you think is holding Black people back in 2020? Wait, no,
It's a,
let me disregard that question. Do you think what your grandparents and your great-grandparents experience is the same as what you're experiencing?
yes. Yes. Actually, if you talk to my grandparents, one of them who's a Marine, so we have similar military experiences, and then we also have similar experiences in sports, dealing with racism in sports, dealing with racism in the workplace, dealing with racism in racism with police brutality. I myself have had some run-ins with the police, right? There's no, oh, well, if you were just doing this, this wouldn't have happened. No, it's just, I just so happen to be present and be black. I just so happen to be assaulted. I've committed no crime. I just so happen to be maced. No crime is committed. I just so happen to be present, and I just so happen to be black. I just so happen to have drugs planted in a car while my uncle was in there. You know, these stories are not, you know, something made up to, just because we want to walk around here and make other groups of people, white people in particular, look like the boogeyman. We would rather not have a boogeyman. We would rather not have, to deal with racial conflict or have these debates or have these fights. It's not something we want, but it's something we deal with. It's something we got to address, and it's something we got to confront. And I'm saying this as someone, who's been able to scratch and claw his way into law school and still, do big things despite what I've faced. I've had access, to institutional help because of white people, right? I knew somebody who was white. So ask yourself this question: had I not have known anybody, had I not known somebody who was white, which is a lot of black people out here, doesn't that create a disparity?
Hold on, let me add somebody real quick. Let me get, because the conversation's gonna go. I'm gonna add one more person. I'm not adding too many more people. I'm just, this it right here. This it. I'm not adding no more people. Okay. Oh my! Oh.
I'm in here. What's good?
What's good? What's good? My phone, Rashad. Go ahead and finish, and I'm gonna let her catch up to speed real quick.
I lost my point. I lost track of.
I knew this was gonna happen.
I forgot the question too.
That's why I was trying to be slick and hurry up and do it real quick, so I don't want you to lose it because you were going. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a lot of are difficult.
Damn it. It's probably just my
conservatives to reconcile. Is I do hear rhetoric that says, oh well, things like abortion and gun rights, those are racially motivated and those are systemic. And then we turn around and say, systemic racism isn't a thing. I just think that's wild, and I think there's some reconciliation that's needed there on the part of conservatives. So.
Well, you know what I find unique about systemic racism that I've been learning just this week?
Uh-huh.
I've talked to maybe about probably 40 people that take your position on systemic racism. And first thing I found that there's no actual definition for it. And then when people begin to define systemic racism for me, they give me analogies. And here's the thing though. All 40 people had a different variation of what systemic racism is supposed to be. That's why I don't believe it's a thing. And if it is, how is it stopping black men from being successful? What exactly is stopping us from being successful? What's hard about building relationships, networking?
What I could probably bet you is that in all those definitions, you'll probably find a similar underlying principle, right? Power, prejudice, institutions. If they haven't mentioned either one of those three things, then they're not talking about systemic racism. But I bet you, in many of those definitions, you've heard a principle of power, you've heard a principle of prejudice, and you've heard a mention of institutions, whether that be a medical institution, a government institution, or what have you, right? So it's there are many definitions for the same things, right? For other things, but does that mean that, you know, the things that other things out there that have different definitions, does that mean that those aren't real, right? Is that the line of thinking we're trying to perpetuate here? I think that's a little sneaky, and I think that's dangerous, but I'm willing to consider that. But I'll retort that you've probably heard some underlying principles that are similar in all those definitions that have been given to you. So
what do we call it when white people feel that they experience these exact same things?
Prejudice. Yes.
So that's how the game is played. Like there's a whole different set of rules in 2020 for black people and white people. Like
No.
There's always been a different
2020
set of
thing.
rules,
These
though.
definitions have been around for ages. And if you have a thorough understanding of these definitions, then you'll be able to see the nuance between them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would know racism is power and prejudice. What did I say earlier? I said that anybody can think anything about anybody. And then you have a prejudice. Only when you attach power to that prejudice is when it becomes a racism. Why do you think we have two different words for two different things? Because there's a nuance. And if you don't understand the nuance, you're just gonna use these words interchangeably. Do you get what I'm saying?
Go ahead, Maya. What were you saying now?
It's like it's legitimately always been two different systems, and then I feel like it's kind of intellectually dishonest to be like, if other people can't define something for me in a way that I see fit, then somehow I mean it don't exist. It's like I just don't think that's a fair assessment, and it's not giving enough credit to the fact that a lot of times people don't have the words to actually intellectualize what's going on. It's just like before the past, 5 or 6 years, people weren't talking about intersectionality and things like that. So
Correct.
it's like just because we didn't have that particular verbiage at the time doesn't mean the ideas behind them and the ideologies that push these things didn't exist somehow. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds cool to be like, oh, it really don't exist. What's keeping black men from being successful? Nothing's stopping them, but there are a lot of things that are putting hurdles in place. There's a difference.
Right.
So it's like, I think he's being extremely hyperbolic, and it's kind of just not fair. And I don't really know how you rationalize with somebody who feels like it has to be an either or type of situation.
Give me an example of a hurdle that white people don't have to face that black people do.
The wage gap. Not only, so you talking, but have you ever read the book Medical Apartheid? We legitimately nothing is the same around this country. Like, I don't know what you just don't want to see it at this point.
No, I want to see
it. As a person who actually was in restaurant management, like literally you will have people that will not hire black people, right? You will have people, we talking about bias based on people's names. We have bias based on area codes. We got bias. I'm talking about Toyota and Bank of America have gotten sued in the past 2-3 years for predatory lending practices by giving higher interest rates to black people.
I mentioned that earlier.
That's a problem specific to black people. What do you mean? Where's an example? There are plenty of them. You just choose not to see them because you're looking for a specific set of criteria, and you're going to continue to move the goalposts instead of just abandoning it. Like, if you're willing to die on the hill, that's cool, but you just got to accept that you're wrong. Like, the stuff exists. Like, there's statistics, there's evidence. I actually shared about 6 links of studies that talk about the wage gap and the disparities and how these things are actually facilitated via systemic racism. Like, this is something that's real. These are like, you can find Harvard studies, you can find Cambridge studies, the numbers and the statistics, all the data is there. So I don't even know why this is a question at this point.
And I mentioned to him earlier, look at our judicial system. Like, I work in it. I can tell you all about it. It's there. I mentioned specific Supreme Court cases, Shelley v. Kramer, Johnson v. Mintosh, and it's there. It is really there, and these aren't just regular humdrum cases. These are landmark cases that determine things. You know, our judiciary is one of our institutions. It is our government.
Absolutely.
It is there. Like, it's a system. How do we not acknowledge that? Like this?
Yeah,
So
I
it
mean,
can't be that black people make less money than white people because maybe, don't have the qualifications or the education. It couldn't be that.
all those things are accounted for in those studies. That's why I'm like, you just moving the goalposts at this point. When you have somebody in the same field, same amount of experience, the wage gap still exists. That is a thing that's factual.
Well, I got to
All
see the data.
factors being equal.
You know what?
All factors
You want
being
data?
equal.
I'll tell you data. Look at the practice of the Florida bar, right? So when the FAMU College of Law was reactivated in 2002, the Florida bar raised the requirements to pass the bar in the state of Florida that same year. And you'll see a statistical significance, which in order to see a statistical significance, you need above 0.3, right? That's equivalent to 30% in anything you do, anything you study when you run a t-test, right? So when you look at statistical significance, you will see that after they raise the standards to pass the bar in Florida, you will see that more students, legal students of color, started failing the bar exam.
Then they should have prepared, right?
No.
That's not how that works.
What Florida should not have done is move the goalpost.
That's not how that works. But
That's
doesn't the
exactly
white
how that
people
works.
have to
That's
take
not
the
how that
same
works.
test?
You-
You
you're
example and
oversimplifying
you
the
refuse to
issue.
see it. That makes no sense.
Do white people
sense.
not have to take the same test?
Yes, they
Yeah,
have to
but
take
you
the
can-
same test, but these are institutions that are old, have been around for forever, and have the financial resources to prepare for the bar. Let me give you another example. Other law schools in Florida, like FSU and Florida's Florida State University and University of Florida, they have more financial resources that give them access to study tools like Barbary, Kaplan, and other bar prep programs that FAMU is just now getting. That's why you saw a decline in our bar passage rates when the Florida bar increased the requirements to pass the bar exam.
I actually
If you
went to
can't see
FAMU,
that
funny
after that,
enough.
I don't know how else to explain it to you. It doesn't make sense.
But here's another thing though. So I'm gonna just bring this up as well. So when we talk about standardized testing, right? This is another thing that where you have statistical evidence that these have been skewed based on race, not only race, but also class, right? But especially race. There has even been talk in the past couple years of them creating a diversity score because they understand the difference in resources and how these standardized tests, whether it be exams for high schools all the way to ACT, SAT, etc., how they have been geared towards like minimizing the amount of people of color who get into certain fields or who are able to advance as far as education is concerned. But the only thing that stopped them from including diversity scores to be weighted against the actual scores of the test was because they understand the institutions could use the diversity scores themselves to further discriminate against people. And now they're talking about doing away with ACT and SAT altogether in some places because these are tools that have been used to hold out, to pretty much gatekeep as far as people like minorities and people of color, especially Black people. Like I said,
Right.
this is stuff that can be proven. This is well documented, like evidence.
And
Like,
I'll give an antidote. I'll give an antidote to that. Like, I didn't get a 35 or anything on the ACT. I got a 28. But that did not determine that I wasn't prepared for college because I graduated, the top of my class from my college. My ACT score did not determine my college preparedness. There are people who came in who got 22s, graduated with 3.8s, 3.9s. Like, the ACT, it doesn't determine a student's college preparedness.
But that didn't stop you, correct? Because you continue to push through regardless of your score because you knew what you wanted in life. To talk about our education system, should our education system just be a pipeline where we just continue just to push students knowing that they are not understanding the material that's being taught?
How are we gauging whether or not they understand the material? How are we gauging?
Right.
Because standardized tests don't do that.
Yeah, like literally, like what are the metrics? Like how do you measure the results? Because like honestly, even when we talk about the education system, we can take that all the way back. If you ever get an opportunity, there's a documentary called Human Resources. Understand that what we learn in school it's a pipeline anyway. It was never to make people smarter. It was never to actually prepare you for success. What happened was when Henry Ford started making cars, him and the president got together and decided they wanted to. That's how block scheduling and stuff like that came about, because it was designed. Our school system was designed based on the assembly line and manufacturing. So that the whole purpose of American education is to create a workforce. It is not to create highly educated individuals. It's not to create people who are actually leaders and things like that. So what we're talking about is a system that's already built messed up, and then there's extra hurdles built in for people of color. So you got to already get over the barrier, the fact that American education as a whole is inadequate, and then you got to go from there to attempt to get even farther and to get into these selective clubs. Essentially, once you get into higher education, it is not as simple as doing good. We all know people with good grades, with good test scores, who did everything right, checked off all the boxes, and got absolutely nowhere. We all know people like that, and it's going to continue to happen because systemic racism, whether you want to believe it, is still a thing.
The only place where I can say that I do see systemic racism is in the criminal justice system. How Black men are 19 times, I believe that was the actual statistic, to be sentenced longer than white counterparts. But I do think if we look at that, then we also have to look at the criminality statistics as well of who is committing the most crimes. And if we do that, then we also have to figure out why they're doing it. And I think that goes back to education. It goes back to growing up in a single parent household. There's a lot of components to the spider web to answer it, but I mean, the criminal justice system, I can definitely agree there is some systemic racism there that's proven. Anything else, it's kind of hard for me to believe.
I mean, but belief and fact, two totally separate things. You don't got to believe in it for it to be there. And then as far as like when we look, if it's present in the criminal justice system, that's like saying that it operates outside of the rest of the United States. So if it's there, the fact that we have to have things like affirmative action in place means that there's an obvious bias that's present there. If affirmative action did not exist, the vast majority of us wouldn't have jobs. Our parents definitely wouldn't have had jobs. So it's like that's like affirmative action itself is evidence of systemic racism. I don't know what more you need than that.
But affirmative action was needed in that time. But we're in 2020, which is a completely
2020, man.
We're
that don't mean nothing.
We're in a completely different time. Black people, I believe, Black people are capable to do anything that they put their mind to. Anybody who wants to be successful at whatever industry that you decide to choose, you are going to run into some hurdles. You just are. But those hurdles should not define you. It should
That's not
motivate
what we're arguing, though. What we're saying is those hurdles are put in place specifically based off of our race. So it's like everybody has hurdles, but what we're saying is there are hurdles that are put there specifically for Black people.
So my question is, if you believe that there's racism in the judicial system, why is it just there? Why? So they was like, we just gonna place it here. We're not gonna put it anywhere else.
What's that?
Right, like it's self-contained somehow.
Okay, you say you believe that there is, some racial issues within the judicial system. You say you believe that. You can't argue that. So what I'm asking is, if you feel or it's there, why do you believe it's just there? Why do you think that this is just the only lane that they're gonna stay in? It's not gonna carry over to something else, or like it's just.
Well, I mean, we can go back to mortgage, like we were having a conversation about. Will anybody lend money to somebody they know that cannot pay them back? If you look at banks, even Black banks have denied Black borrowers. And we don't want to say that's racism. And even some banks have denied white people and accepted Asian people. So I think it's a far-fetched to just say everything in 2020 is comparable to what my my great grandmother went through or my grandmother went through. I actually have it easier, at least I believe, and I think statistics shows that my generation has it way easier than what the people before me had to go through.
Nobody's arguing that though. The point, just because it's easier doesn't, once again, it's like there's a difference between something being harder or difficult versus obstacles completely just not being there. So it's like you can have things, it's the difference between, that's like if you're starving, right? And then you go from like starving and don't know if you're going to eat every day to at the very least being able to get a McChicken every day. Yes, you're doing better, but you're still doing a lot worse than you could be, right? And it's just like, okay, you get to a point to where maybe I can get 2 McChickens a day. It doesn't matter. There are still people eating steak and lobster. So it's like, it's cool that you have it easier than your grandparents.
But can we agree that eating those foods aren't good? Can we agree that?
That's not the point.
I know, I understand where you're going, but eating those foods are not good, and which leads to heart disease, cancer, and so many other things.
All that,
but go ahead.
All that.
I like your hair, by the way.
Appreciate it. But but I'm gonna always agree with the fact that the life. My grandfather was born in 1922. The stuff he had to go through, I don't got to deal with. I don't have to deal with none of that stuff, right? But it still remains, though, that we have a long way to go. So it's like the ability to attain wealth, like you said, with the mortgages, if we're getting charged different lending rates, that is literally a roadblock into creating wealth. If we are being redlined and not even being allowed to enter into certain neighborhoods, that way we can actually build our net worth. That is another way of impeding like generational wealth. So it's like, it's not proof that those things don't exist. And it's like, if you're going to be happy with crumbs, that's cool, but that don't mean I have to be, because I understand that there's still a long way for us to go. And I got a son, and I know at the end of the day, if he gets, me personally, I've been a victim of police brutality, and I almost had my whole life thrown away behind traffic tickets. That's not something that happens to everybody else. You know what I'm saying? This is not something. The fact that the playing field is just not level, and we got to call it what it is. So it's like, when you're dealing with the judicial system looking like it is, when you're dealing with predatory lending, and then, like I said, Toyota got sued, Bank of America got sued for charging higher interest rates to Black people. So it's like, yeah, they're getting the loans, but when you start comparing the terms, you can't just be happy with crumbs, because if other people are getting treated better than me, that's a problem still. Now I'm not in shackles, but at the end of the day, I need those same hurdles removed. I'm not a proponent for equality. I'm a person for equity, to each according to their need. I don't need you to give me no handouts. I just need you to go and get out of my way. That's where I'm at. And so for me, because I understand, so I'm gonna always find a way around. But me, the fact that, I can go, like the stock market don't know if I'm Black or not. So I can go get on tomorrow. I'll be trading options contracts, and I can make money free from a job. So somebody not hiring me because I have natural hair, I don't got to worry about none of that stuff. But it doesn't change the fact that everybody is not meant to do everything, and life should still be attainable in the same degree to people, regardless of race, whatever else. And that's the problem. We understand, and we can prove that there are these disparities in how people are being treated and the access they have to opportunities based off of their race alone. Because if we can talk about class, we can do all that other stuff, right? People like to say racism is a symptom of classism, but it's kind of ironic that majority of poor people are people of color or Black people, right? So it's like, so you either got to say that every other Black person besides you is trash and incapable, or you got to admit there has to be some particular hurdle that makes it harder for us to succeed. Because if not, like you legitimately shitting on majority of Black people.
Why is there not an option that Black people are just not making better decisions and choices?
So you mean to tell me I'll what, 40-something million of us? Come on, don't even sound right.
No, you're right. It don't. So because 40-some million of us is not in poverty. Matter of fact,
right.
18.6 million people that are millionaires, 8% of those are Black.
Yeah, but we make up more than 8% of the population. That's a disparity right there.
We only make up 13% of the population.
And so roughly
8%
13%
of
of
18 million
millionaires.
is quite a bit of people. That's
It don't
actually
matter
pretty good.
though. It doesn't matter though. That's like if you got a business, right? If I'm in a city that's 40% black, but only 12% of my employees are black, that's a problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, you cool with getting some, but that's still not enough. That's still
Well,
representing that there's a bias there. If black people make up 13% of the population, they should make up 13% of, I don't care, law enforcement, 13% of judges and lawyers, 13% of doctors. It should be 13% of millionaires. The statistics should be fair across the board. They should
you
make up
ruling
13%
out
of the poor in America.
you ruling out the fact that people, we all, why these people that are making this money are exceptional. They press beyond the mark. They actually put in the effort. You can't rule that out. And I feel like everybody can do that. It's just if you're willing to or not. You can work just as hard as anybody else that become as successful as those people. And somebody's going to be a LeBron James one day.
Mm-hmm.
If
Just
you
to
work hard
piggyback
enough.
off of that, Maya, so I think in LA and NYPD, in the police force alone, it's now become a little bit more diverse from what it was to the 90s to now.
Absolutely.
But people are still saying that is systematic racism. Now, I do believe police brutality does exist, so I'm not one of those people who say that it doesn't exist at all. I believe that it's a small percentage, and I do believe cops, unfortunately, look out for cops, and prosecutors look out for cops. I know that those things exist, but even when the police is diverse, and we still say that there's some systematic racism in that institution, how do you address that?
You address it by looking at it for what it is. Racism essentially is as American as apple pie, right? Racism is weaved into the very fabric of America, and this is what built this country. What happens in America is that black people and white people get the same programming. It does not matter. We get the same program. And that's just like when you see the little kids with the doll test, right? Even young black kids are going to choose the white doll over the black ones. We get the same program. We are not immune to it. So when you have black police officers, especially when you look at celebrities, when you look at the foolishness Terry Crews got going on, you look at people like Candace Owens, I'm all for people being individual, right? And I'm all for, breaking off from the herd. But essentially, when people realize that it's more than one way to be black for real, they tend to root for the other side. People understand that there's value in having proximity to whiteness, right? Because they believe that they can be granted those same protections. And this is why people do that. It's the same thing with fraternities. You take stuff that you would normally take, you participate in things you wouldn't normally participate in for the benefit of being part of the group. I see the same thing in the military, right? People, and it's funny because you have situations where I've seen it personally where people got to be reminded that they black. Yeah, y'all can hooah, and we all army, whatever, we battle buddies, whatever the case may be. But when a situation comes up where the demographics are split a different way, right? It depends on, because different groups or different identities take precedent over others. So depending on what choices that you're faced with, like people get reminders on a regular basis in the military, you're still black, bro. They don't care about none of that. And when you don't got the uniform on, nobody cares. But while you have it on, you feel like there's this brotherhood and it's supposed to take precedent, right? And if you want to keep the protection of being a part of that group, then when in Rome, you got to do as the Romans do. So this is why you have black cops who participate in police brutality themselves. This is why you have black doctors, black surgeons, etc., that participate in the same harmful practices that eventually go on to cause the deaths of plenty of black people, right?
But we don't talk about that.
That's
not being talked about.
Well, because it sounds kind of crazy. I literally just had a conversation.
But it's not crazy. It's actually true. There's a lot of doctors, whether they're black, white, Asian, Middle Eastern, that cause medical malpractice. Yeah. Of course, they go to arbitration to settle out quietly. But still, that's a conversation that I think we should be talking about, just like we talk about police brutality. One thing that you did say that I do like, we are conditioned at a very young age, all of us, that white is right.
Yeah.
There are some of us who start to question that, like, no, that makes no sense. But there are some of us that will always continue to believe that white is right. We can say that through our entertainment. We can say that through politics. I mean, just right now, I think there's only 57 people in this current U.S. Congress that are people of color.
Right.
We don't talk about that, so I don't understand how we expect people to lead us legislatively if they can't really represent us. But even though that point is true, we should also talk about how people don't go out and vote for candidates that they think should represent them. I always think there's two sides to a coin. I do think there are some disparities that face Black people, but I also think there are some personal responsibilities that we should be having along with that conversation. I think it's very, very important. I'm a firm believer that Black people can do anything that they put their mind to. I mean, we create the traffic light, we create the iron board, we can. I mean, people probably don't even know we create the home security system for homes. I think it was a Black woman who did that.
Yeah.
But we only talk about those things in February, where we only get 28 or 29 days. I mean, me personally, I think you should be talking about Black History 365, not just 28 or 29 days. But American history is Black history.
Agreed. Absolutely.
It is. And while we talk about the evil that America once did, there are some great things that America has been doing as well. But I think in 2020, for Black people to get ahead, it does take education. It does take a 2-parent household. It does take networking. It does take risk. If you want to be an entrepreneur or an innovator, it takes risk. And I think it's very troubling if we're telling the next generation that you can't get ahead. Because this young generation that's coming up right now, unfortunately, all they see on CNN, MSNBC, their local news, is Black kids getting shot. And that's being programmed in their mind that that's going to happen, when that's not, statistically, that's not true. There are more white men being killed by police officers than Black men.
That's a fact.
But anytime a police officer shoot a civilian, I do think we need to investigate why that happens, regardless of the race. We need to investigate why that happens. I don't even think the prosecutors should be doing that, because again, that's a buddy-buddy system.
Right.
Well, I just said a lot, but those are my thoughts.
So I'm gonna agree with you on pretty much everything you just said. The only thing I will say is, yes, there are more white people in America. So if for anybody who can actually, like my statistics teacher used to tell me, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. So the thing is, when you look at those statistics, when you look at the amount of Black people killed by police proportionate to our population in those areas, we're still being killed at a higher rate. So it's like we have to be honest about what these statistics really mean. So it's like if we only make up, 13% of the population of the country, but we make up 20-30% of people that are murdered by police, like that's a problem there. And so once again, my thing is you got to learn how to weigh things. And another thing I will say that's important though, so we can talk about things like systemic racism, right? And this is something I acknowledge, but I have a son. So my thing is, I know for a fact he has nothing to gain by me convincing him that he's oppressed. But that does not mean that we cannot have the conversation about what's going on. So my thing is, if I know the hurdle exists, then I know how to prepare for it and get around it. But I feel like it's still my duty, though, to attempt to lower that hurdle or smooth out that speed bump for everybody behind me. And so we can do both, but most people don't think we can. And this was my issue with the conscious community, because we talk about the struggle, like it sounds so just defeatist to me. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's not that you can't do these things. Yes, these obstacles exist, but there's a difference between, like I said earlier, you can have an obstacle, but that shouldn't stop you. It might inconvenience you. It might take you on a detour, but it should never stop you, right? Or you just gotta find workarounds. And that's why me personally, I would never let somebody control how I feed myself or my kid. because I understand those obstacles are in place. So instead of complaining about them, I just find ways around them. And so that's the mentality that I try to instill in my son. It's like, okay, I'm not finna teach him that he's oppressed. I know I don't want him to walk out in the world unaware though. But at the same time, it's like you can do anything, you can be anything, you just got a plan, and it might be a little harder for you, but if that's what you want, you got to thug it out. But like you also said, though, we're programmed at a very young age. And the thing is, when you look at, I don't care who you ask, I don't care, people of all races, when you talk about politics and how things actually become legislation, the average person cannot tell you. So now we got to figure out why the average American has no political knowledge, but somehow their interests are being represented. So for me, they turn the presidential election into a popularity contest. And so this is what people know about. I don't care, president. I'm gonna keep it 1,000 with you. I ain't voted for the president since 2004. And I probably won't ever do it again. But what I do feel like is everybody should be active when it comes to local politics. Things in your city that are actually going on, show up at those meetings though. When this legislation is being made, you need to actually make appointments to go visit your local representatives, because can't nobody give you what you want if they don't know what that is. Figure out how to get your interest on these agendas, but most people don't understand how the political process works. So for people who do know, it takes for us to educate the people who don't know. But because that feeds into the system itself. So just like, school funding is based on property taxes. So pretty much if you live in a poor neighborhood, and we understand the more Black people in your neighborhood, the lower your property value is going to be anyway. So it's like, that means that the schools your children go to are going to get less funding. So you got to go to those meetings and show up to do what you got to do. And then that's another reason why we should also be focusing on fixing up our neighborhoods too. So it's like adding value where you can, and it's going to be small incremental steps. And it's not that these things are impossible. My whole point is just to acknowledge it's there. Nobody's saying that it has to stop you. Nobody's saying that anybody's incapable. But if we don't acknowledge these obstacles, we're setting our future generations up for failure. Because they're going to get out there thinking everything is puppies and rainbows and get smacked in the face with their own Blackness. And it's going to suck. And it's going to cause them to give up. So, but it's like, if you already know it's going to be tough, you already go out in the world knowing what to expect.
You don't feel like thinking that things are going to be tough will make a person give up? I think I've seen more people decide to avoid a situation if they feel like it almost seems unbearable, rather than to get in and try it and find out it's a little tougher than they expected. They seem to still maybe give it a bigger shot. But to me, saying that there is something out there to hunt us down and stop us is the oppression. And I feel like it's the only form, because I'm 34, be 35 Tuesday. All this stuff that people are talking about, not only have I not really experienced it, I've never even seen it. And I live in Arkansas.
Well, that's dangerous rhetoric, though, because that's the same rhetoric that white people use to say racism don't exist. Because I don't experience something, it means it doesn't exist somehow.
Why is that rhetoric?
I said, that's not honest. I've personally been a victim of police brutality. I know it exists. I've personally, I made a 28 on my ACT. I made like a 1,300 on the SAT. Did all that. Couldn't even get in the University of Fayetteville. I got into Princeton, though. Arkansas is definitely a hotbed for a bunch of racism. I didn't been called the N-word since I was small. I've had teachers intentionally hold me back from opportunities. This is something that I personally experienced. And then growing up not only growing up in Arkansas, but then having a child, his first few years was in Arkansas, and seeing how the system dismisses. So for instance, if you look at schools and you look at the statistics on how Black males are treated, Black kids in general, but mostly Black males, when it comes to being diagnosed with things like ADHD, and actually sending them to counseling, whatever the case may be, versus just deeming them bad and sending them to alternative schools and all types of stuff. It's like, that's what systemic racism is. It's basically saying, because you are Black, any behavior that you're exhibiting that might be out of the ordinary makes you violent or makes you a problem, instead of attempting to address the root issue. We see that. We get a lack of medical services, period, though. And we see that disparity in the school system. That is what systemic racism is. Systemic racism is also, you know, if once a school fills their diversity quota or puts enough people in their institution to not be in trouble with the law and receive their funding from the government, after that, even if you meet all the criteria, you still don't get in. It's jobs asking you to cut your hair because you got dreadlocks for them to give you a job. It's only a handful of states where it's illegal to discriminate against people based on their hair. In the military, people with black hair, it is hard. Like, I've actually been at the center of numerous investigations. I had dreads at one point. And the way I was treated, it wasn't even me who reported it. It's other people who reported it, but the discrimination and the mistreatment based on hair. And that's things that could have altered my career at that point. That's what systemic racism is. Not because I did something wrong, not because I was inadequate as a soldier. It was simply because you didn't like my hair because it was too black. And so it's like, it wasn't against regulations, none of that. But you decide that you're gonna make things happen that could affect my career or get me kicked out the military altogether based on something so minuscule. That's what systemic racism is.
Trouble a few years ago about targeting women, black women hair being out of red just a few years ago.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. It's not. I think people don't really understand what systemic racism is. So systematic racism is basically when there's rules and criteria put in place, and there's a process for attempting to oppress people. Systemic racism means that something is in the root, it's in the core of these institutions. And we know that for a fact exists in the judicial system, like legitimately everywhere. There's too many examples of it. Once again, it shouldn't stop you from getting where you're trying to get to, but at the same time, the obstacle shouldn't be there to begin with. And we can't be like, I think it's bogus to be like, it don't affect me, so I don't care. Or I'ma just decide that it don't exist because it don't affect me, because it's a lot of stuff that's not going to affect you. Like, it's kind of like as a woman, right? Or matter of fact, you know, having a son, police brutality, right? Most of them, there's plenty of women that are also dying at the hands of police, but it's men too. So it's like, you know, I'm not a woman, so I'm not supposed to go stand up for these people. It's like, I got a son, though, but that shouldn't matter in general. Something wrong is happening. Therefore, I should acknowledge the wrong that's taking place, whether it happens to me or not. I don't have to see something with my own tool to know that it's there, right? Because I think that's a weird way to view the world. And growing up in Arkansas, I'm positive you've experienced it. With as many lawsuits that take place, as many investigations that take place, as many, even when it comes down to jobs and all types of stuff, the school system in Arkansas, like even the jails in Arkansas at one point was deemed unconstitutional with some of the stuff they was doing to inmates. And then I know people personally who've been railroaded. Like, Arkansas is legitimately a hotbed of racism. You still got active KKK down there. And these people are not just, you know, rednecks and hoods. These are police officers. These are judges. These are people that are in positions to make decisions that actually affect people's lives and their livelihood. So to be like, oh, I live in Arkansas, I ain't never seen it, it just means you got blinders on and you don't want to see it. Like, at some point, you just got it if you don't care.
How can you?
What do we call Kamala Harris, who locked up? What do we call Kamala Harris, who locked up a lot of black inmates in the state of California? She was paying them less. What do we call that?
Call her trash. What you mean? What you mean? That's trash.
Because what happens is with black people, we locally get like branded with the left, and then when we open the mouth, it's like, oh nigga, the left trash too. We'll believe that shit.
Straight up.
Yeah, we'll pump.
Yeah, like, no, I treat people on an individual basis. We're not doing none of that. I don't care if you a liberal, progressive, conservative. I don't care. What is your personal track record?
Yeah. Because lefts will address that up real quick on it. They address that up real quick.
Absolutely.
What
I'm good.
AJ, what you saying?
No, I mean, she was kind of living out my experience and telling me what I have done and experienced, and I didn't understand how that was possible because
I
I'm
didn't tell
telling
you
you.
what you experienced. I'm telling you
Yeah,
it was
that's what you said.
happening. You just didn't see it. That's totally different. Totally different.
You said, I can guarantee you've experienced those were your exact words. Did you not mean to say it?
No, I definitely meant to say that. You probably experienced it. You just didn't know what you were experiencing in the time.
Okay.
Because at
So
the end of the
exactly.
day, if those lending practices are happening and you go apply for a house, you're experiencing that. You just might not see it because you're not being able to actually compare the rates of other people. Still happening though. So you still experience it, whether
So
you
how do you
acknowledge those
see it?
experiences mean nothing.
If I'm unable to compare the rates because that's uncomparable apparently, how
It's
are
not
you able to
uncomparable.
compare?
I'm just saying you didn't.
Okay, so how do you know I haven't?
What you mean? I never said you did or didn't. What I'm saying is if you were in a situation to buy a house, right? And you have instances where there's predatory lending that's taking place in that state or with that particular bank, you're experiencing systemic racism. You're just unaware of it. Doesn't change the fact that it's not there. That's why I said whether you probably experienced it, you just didn't know that's what was going on at the time. On some level, that's just how it works. That's why it's systemic. It's built in.
You know, Barack Obama in 1995, he had a class action lawsuit. He had 186 clients who said they were discriminated against by Citibank, and he actually won. He won a big settlement from that. But
Mm-hmm.
also, out of the 186, only 19 were actually able to pay back the loans. So we talked about this earlier with Rashad. I think any person that's very contract savvy, whether they're black, white, or whatever, will put something in your face. Hey, just sign this. When does it come back to the individual? To me personally, and it's probably unfair because I work for an attorney, before I sign anything, I always take it to my boss. And we sit down, we read it together, and he takes out his little red pen and he makes his little marks, and I go back. But it's also about networking and connections. I mean, just in the Georgia GOP right now, me being a black man, they look at me, I don't want to say differently, but I'm getting invited to speak to many places. And I am one of those people who do speak about, police brutality. I do also speak about black on black crime. I do speak about abortion rate. I do speak about education. I do speak about black issues from a conservative standpoint. But when does it come back to personal responsibility?
So here's my thing, though. It's always going to come back to personal responsibility, but at the same time, institutions also have to have that same responsibility. It's like if I'm a predator, right, and I prey on you, whether or not you feel like you know what's going on, right, whether or not you take accountability of the situation does not change the fact that I was in the wrong. Does not change the fact that I had malice to begin with. And that's the problem. Yes, you can be held accountable, but at the same time, we both got to be held accountable. So it's like, had I not initiated the deception, you would have never been in that situation to begin with. Or had I given you better choices to begin with, you would have made better choices. And that's why it's called predatory lending. It's like, as a financial institution, because normally if you want to give financial advice, where do you go? The bank, right? And they're supposed to help you make those decisions because these are the people who are highly educated in finance. So you're supposed to be able to trust these institutions, especially when they have all of your other accounts. They know what type of money you make. They know what you can and cannot afford, right? They know what type of investment vehicles you have, X, Y, and Z. And you got to give them this whole list of it's so much criteria to do things like buy a house, so much information that they need. You're not even supposed to make additional purchases for X amount of time. Like, they want to see your tax returns. They want to see everything. How do you take all of this information with your education, right, and your position of power, and then decide that you're going to give me something you know I can't afford? And then you're going to spend it to me, right, and show me these monthly payments that look adequate at the time, but then you don't tell me about balloon payments. You don't tell me that my APR is going to fluctuate. You don't tell me about none of this additional stuff. And even if I do read this contract, right, I might not necessarily understand the jargon or some of the clauses that are in there. And then if I got to go pay for a lawyer to read over this paperwork, it's like you're the financial institution. That is literally your job. I shouldn't have to. And this is why it's like,
But
okay,
the bank is in
yeah,
the process of making money.
yeah, that's their job. That's their whole goal. Yeah, and it's cool because it's like now I think everybody is in a position because the bank gave out all of these loans that they knew people couldn't pay, and it ended up putting them in a tight spot. Would you rather not get money at all, or would you rather get a little bit? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and it's too many banks being sued for the same thing. And like I said, other finance companies like Toyota, look what Wells Fargo just went through recently. Like, and it's to the point to where, like I said, there's evidence that these companies are preying on Black people and people of color. Like, there's evidence. So it's like I said, whether or
they're
not
preying on people of color, or they're just preying on poor people?
I think a double whammy. Double whammy.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because even like I said, income aside, the rates are still going to be different based on race. That's why I'm like, poor people it costs a lot of money to be poor. Being poor is very expensive, right? And we know that for a fact. And that's going to be the same across the board. But it's still going to be a difference when you break down different demographics of poor people. We still going to end up with the shorty of the stick being Black. It is what it is. So we got two things working against us, and not having the resources and it being preyed upon because we don't have the resources. And then, you have people with this weird sense of fear, or it's not even fear at this point. It's just how everything has been. How many times on a job or talking to your family do people always want to say, well, that's how it always been? And so that's why they continue to do things. So now, like I said, racism was built into the very fabric of America, and these people pass these same ideologies on to their family, and they're going to conduct business the same way their family been conducting business. So it's like, I don't know why people just expect that stuff to disappear when it's built in at this point.
Do you think America will ever be a utopia?
No.
Do you think
It's
Black people are
impossible.
racist against Black people?
We don't have the power to be racist, but I do think, like I said, we all get the same programming. So Black people kill other Black people for the same reason white people kill us, because they don't see any value in Black life. It's just the same across the board. We all have the same ideas and thoughts about Black people until you get to a point to where you can actually shake the programming. But that's hard because everything around you is telling you that this is your worth, this is what you're capable of.
So as we get ready to close it out, solutions. It's your favorite part, right? Tell us solutions. Give us all solutions.
Solutions. I think first, Black people need to get economic power. After they get economic power, they need to then get political power, because you can then buy your politicians. Because that's
economic power first, and tell me how to get political. Give me some feasible. How can I do that?
Well, I think first Black people need to start owning their own communities. No offense, but get the Indians and other races out of our own communities, own our gas stations, own our beauty shops, own the barber shops, own everything within your community. Those politicians will have to come to your district because they need your vote. And then you can get the politicians to do what you want them to do. And that then change into judicial law. You can start getting laws to favor the things that you believe affect you too. And I think everything else after that, education. But I think economics is the main solution for Black people. And I also think the main solution for Black people, I don't want us to continue to tell each other that we are oppressed, because Black people built this country. I don't care what anybody else say. Black people built this country. We might have had chains on us when we did it, but we built this country. That is a fact. We contribute so much to the existence of America. We made America this great empire that it is known today. If Black people see their worth in the American body, then I think they would take pride into that. That's all I have to say.
Next. Real solution.
I think Dante covered it for me. You know, I just think that Black people really need to develop more economic and political power and build better relationships when you get those positions, so that we can basically do what white people are doing, which is maybe show some favoritism to some of the people that we do have those relationships with.
Mhm.
And also, I agree that we definitely need to stop telling our people that you're oppressed. I feel like that is the oppression. I can't change my mind on that. You know, I feel like the more we keep talking about these things is what makes them real. And I feel like if we can stop, it's sort of like when you break up with that girl and you keep making efforts to try to make her jealous. You keep chasing her, you try to make her jealous, and she don't give a damn. She done moved on, you know what I'm saying? And she with somebody else and happy. I feel like that's what we're doing to white people instead of investing that energy into being better. So, yeah.
You hit that for me with that. Yeah. I completely agree with that. No, real talk. Because so for me, I think a lot of people are extremely one-sided on the issue. Like I could definitely, everything both of y'all have said so far, I think is a wonderful idea. But that's why my main issue is getting people financially literate. That's my main platform, right? Teaching people like to invest in how to use money in order to. I keep telling people, y'all want to talk about revolution? I did that activism, all this, bro. Revolution costs money, period. So you got, and it's the same step. So for me, helping people get money, right? So it's like you have to find a way to where you're not as so dependent on the people that you feel like are oppressing you, right? You got to figure out a way to free yourself. If this is a problem or obstacle for you, you got to find a way to move around it. So finding ways to get money and to take that money and to be able to vie economically in order to gain political power, XYZ. Like that's the solution. And I will also agree that convincing people that they're oppressed probably isn't the best thing. That's why I say I can acknowledge these things, but that'll never be the foundation for my platform ever. Because like I said, we don't gain anything from it. And it's like he said, we in this weird relationship with white people. And for me, I could care less what they, like, I absolutely could not care less what they got going on over there. My issue is how do I get me and my household in order? And then what can I do to help other people get their households in order? And then, like you said, we can actually take charge of our communities and actually pretty much, aid in the progression of the larger Black community, like as a whole. And so that's all we can do.
So I appreciate everybody going on, man. Man, appreciate you coming through for Last Minute Mind.
Yeah, that was out of nowhere. I was watching Dragon Ball Super.
It was, because like I said, I got to figure out how to stream this live on Facebook as well. But like I said, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I knew for a fact you guys conservative, like I said, and I like what you guys said on the conservative part, how most people are a little more conservative than they believe they are. They just don't like that label conservative because of what it's associated with for them in their mind. Yeah. So that's why I was like, I'm cool. Like most people's like, so you gonna talk to conservative? I'm like, yeah. Like I'm like,
let's just be real, Reggie. It's because Donald Trump is in office. That's why
that's
everybody
hates
that word. That's the reason why everybody hate that word.
I don't think it's just that. I just think what it is, it goes back to that whole radical how it's been programmed to Black people. Whenever you hear Republican or conservative, you automatically just assume that Black people out there. Like we out of that. When in reality, most Black people we don't want no handouts. We don't want no, what I'm saying, we just want fair shit. Just, equal shit. Give us shit, leave us the fuck alone. Give us a fair chance, something, leave us the fuck alone. Now, granted, there's some people out there that, want to get up, but that's what everything. But for some reason, they love to play it back to us like, all Black people just want hands out. I'm like, no, we just want to be left the fuck alone. That's it.
Yeah.
So,
I think Black people feel that way about Republican or the Republican Party. When Black people started this party, this is our party.
Yeah, they started with the radical Republicans right after Reconstruction. And we popped that thing out. We had more Black people in positions of, politics than any other time.
Any other time.
Before white people's like, nah, we can't have that shit no more. They get a little too. They forget. They forget. Let's run it back.
I think if people like really do their American history, they will see that even though Republicans hate the word progressive, they've been more progressive on a lot of issues than liberals. When we talk about civil rights, when we talk about women's rights, they've been a lot more progressive on it. But but we're tearing down our statues right now. That's what we're doing. We have the party of racist people, the party who started racism, tearing down statues that represent their party. But
it's
weird.
It's just a bullshit ass no look pass behind the back. That's all it is. When you catch your spouse cheating, you're like, I'm cheating. And they're like, hey, man, look, I did the dishes. I cleaned out the garage. You're like, okay, cool. I've been asking you to do that for a while. But there's still, let's get back to that. Oh, yeah, man, I walked the dog, took it to the groomer. I did this. And you're like, nah, okay, I appreciate all that. That needed to be done. But let's get back to this right here. And I think that's what's going on right now because they're doing.
We have to tell Black people that they have to be very mindful of doing these things now because it might not happen this year, but I have a fear that local governments and the federal government is going to come back and get all these people who were looting and destroying property because everything has been caught on camera.
They already started.
And that's putting that's going to put more Black people back in jail.
But see, the thing about that is not every Black person was looting. Like most of the Black person is like, yo, it ain't us. And then, you know what I'm saying, on the news, like, well, these looters, these Black looters, they would zoom in to the Black people. And if you notice, if you look in the back, it's a white person doing some dumb shit, but they stay focused on just the Black people saying, yo, look at the Black people, what they're doing. There's looters, they're doing this. Like, once again, where the fuck did Palace of Bricks come from?
Well, I think that was placed there. I think that but to me, that's
man.
Like,
yeah,
neatly stacked bricks. So you mean you already
I get what you're saying
out there. You hate that, so you won't just let them come with some bricks and like neatly place them right there and be like, all right.
Yeah, with no construction site anywhere. Come on.
I do have to me, that is very questionable. But I think people should have enough common sense. Just because the government give two people guns that don't like each other, that does not mean you have to shoot each other. How about you point the gun the other way?
I agree.
They put those bricks there. You should question why they put those bricks there. You should question why they did that. And then we had some bad apples in the protest that then threw the bricks at the police officer knowing you were going to get a certain response. And so now, like, we're not even protesting what y'all really want to talk about, which was police brutality. We have now left that conversation. We're now talking about systemic racism. And I'm like, again, I'm a person who don't believe it, but, I want every Black person to feel that they can make it. So if I have to, convince every person individually, I'm all for it. I know whatever statue that I make it in life, I will make sure that doors are always open for Black people.
And that's all it come down to. Once again, that's what it come down to. Most people get lost in the sauce and want to argue about, minute shit that ain't gonna change nothing. Like, why would I argue and try to get somebody to change their views when they not agree the line and saying that's it. So what's the point of me talking to them about that? Because there's a point.
Right.
So let me talk to somebody. Let me talk to somebody that might not agree with it, but I mean, cool. They be like, all right, Rich, I know what you're saying, but I'm gonna let you slide in the door. Go and do what you're gonna do over there. Like, do that over there. You know what I'm saying? I don't really agree with it, but cool. I'm gonna let you in, you slide over there. And we can do our thug thizzle as agreement as Black people need to be, you know what I'm saying, have our own choices in our way, But I ain't gonna lie to you, whenever Maya say some shit on Facebook, y'all should be friends with her. But whenever this motherfucker say,
y'all ain't gonna like it.
That's my favorite fucking line. This the hill y'all choose to down. This right here. This here right here. That shit fucking tickles me, goddammit.
Yeah.
I live in Atlanta, Georgia right now, and I'm so mad at our mayor and our governor. The fact that both of y'all can't come together and figure out this pandemic is a problem in itself. Why are you making this a political issue? Like, that's what the elections are.
Political issue nowadays.
Like seriously, more people are catching COVID-19 because of failures. And I mean, pretty much that's what it is. But
I'm so tired of COVID. But yeah.
Well, I do feel like it's political, actually. That's the first time tonight that I guess me and you've been indifferent, but I feel like everything about it is political. Of course, that's a whole other conversation, but I look at the timing and, it's just like if you look, Trump just signed the MCA deal, which is basically saying, China, y'all got to pay our way. 2 weeks later, we got COVID from China. So I feel like it's definitely political. It's a matter of how far you want to go into politics, but everything we dealing with, I feel like right now is political. All of it. Black Lives Matter. Them bricks. White guy said George Soros paid them to drop them bricks off there, which is a known billionaire liberal. So I think we can't escape the politics right now. I don't think we can. So, man,
we need to be honest with that money for Black Lives Matter is gone, because it's not going to Black communities and it's not going to HBCUs. And quite frankly, if all these companies have now found the heart that racism exists in America, well, I mean, as Maya and I think Rashad also said, racism will always exist in America. I think it's different from what it was in the early parts of America till now. I think it is different, but it will always exist. But any of those, going back to the point of companies, those companies who really care about Black lives, how about you start investing in HBCUs? Because if you go to an HBCU college, they'll ask you for some money quickly. They'll ask you for money. Black Lives Matter, to me right now, has turned into Black Lives Marketing. So I'm gonna just say Black Lives Matter so I can get more Black people to subscribe to me.
Absolutely.
To buy my product, but you don't even care about the Black.
No, it's virtue
How
signaling.
about you start a scholarship? How about you go give you each month give a startup Black business a loan? Why don't you do things like that?
That's exactly what I was saying. That whole pump faking bullshit. And then I tell white people around here, don't donate to that shit. Donate to shit around you that you can fucking see. What's the point of going all the way in fucking Florida and California when you can just drive down the street and shit change? Donate, go spend some money with a chicken place. And go spend some money with a boutique. Like, see, you know what I'm saying? Take that money where you actually can see. So I agree with that.
If people read what Black Lives Matter really stand for, not what they see on TV, but go read their website. I think some Black people will be turned off about what they read.
Yeah, I agree.
Because one of the things that's hurting the Black community, we don't have fathers in our home. We don't. We have to be honest about that conversation. We can talk about other disparities, but we don't have fathers in our home. And the Black Lives Matter movement on their website don't mention fathers.
Well, see,
that should be a problem.
Well, see, my thing about that is, okay, granted, I admit there should be some fathers in there, but I think what it is, Black people get too emotional. What's happening is they make the noise. They know for a fact you make the noise, we're going to run, and they're distracted. Then, you know what I'm saying? We get distracted. Like, once again, we start the conversation. Okay, let's get busy over here. Because we can't, like, honestly, I ain't going to lie to you, the whole protesting shit, people, that's cool. I'm good, but once again, I'm down there with the Rodney King shit. All right, cool. We got the video. We showed you what happened. We played the court game. We went to court. The man lied in court. You acquitted. Bet. What happened was, when them Black folks took their ass back down in their neighborhood, they said, you know what? Since you didn't want to listen to us and didn't nobody want to feel our pain, we're going to shake this shit down. And LAPD was not ready for that shit. And once they seen it, the Black folks were serious about that shit. And they was like, look, if they brown, let them through. They white, we're going to get their ass out. They got going to beat their ass. Now, once again, I don't invite violence. But what I'm saying is, I understand frustration. And after they pulled the white men out the car, was like, look, that's how Rodney King felt. The first thing that happened was, okay, maybe we should take these people serious. Because what I'm learning through our history is, without violence, motherfuckers ain't listening.
Absolutely.
Motherfuckers, they not listening. Like, even with bullying, you can ask a bully for a long, please stop doing that. Please stop him. But the second you punch that bully back in the mouth, then all of a sudden, that's when the motherfucker ready to listen. So once again, I don't incite it, but I'm with it.
Let me ask you this question. So if, like, Buckhead is, unfortunately, it's more of a white predominant area where I live at. Mm-hmm. They took down Target here. What if Target don't decide not to build another Target? Like, what are people in my community supposed to do? Now, let me go to a black community. What if they burnt down a Walmart here in Atlanta, and Walmart decides not to build another Walmart in that community?
It opens the door for small business owners. Nobody care about Walmart.
That's
Black
Well, they
folks-
burnt them down too, though.
But see, that's my issue.
Exactly.
Though. But here's my issue though. That just proves your point. Easy come, easy go. So that just means I need some shit that I need to rely on my shit.
Absolutely.
Give you.
What do you tell those older people who might need those medicines or might need to get those necessities that don't have a vehicle, that might walk, or the people who work in those stores, regardless if it's Walmart, but just any of those places that were burned down, who now can't support their family because they don't have income? Like, what do we tell those people? Like, I'm all for protests. I'm all for protesting. I'm all for getting out there with your guns, Second Amendment. I'm down for it. But when you start burning, not the white community, but the black community, because one thing I noticed this year, Tulsa, Oklahoma happened on June 30th. What were we doing June 30th, 2020? Burning down black communities. The same thing that happened back then.
I'm gonna have to disagree wholeheartedly with that because the stuff, none of the stuff that black people were burning down in the vast majority of the country was owned by black people. None of those businesses. I don't care if you burning down a housing project. It didn't belong to you. It's not burning down the black community. It's burning down the community where black people happen to live. There's a difference. And so it's just,
But if they don't have a place to live, what are we doing to them?
How many of them
burned down?
Look at the numbers right now. How many people are legitimately put out of homes and stuff right now in those places where those protests took place? It's just like you gotta look at it for what it is. We can what if all day long, but those black businesses. Matter of fact, it's a black dude with a Burger Inn franchise in Dallas. He understood with the pain, his windows got broken, and guess what he did? He went in there, cleaned it up, and was serving protesters because he's like, I understand. And so his business didn't get messed with again. And in order to make an omelet, you gotta crack a few eggs. It is what it
I know
is.
you said not to give another what if, but I really truly feel like that he gave food to protest so they don't burn his stuff now.
Smart.
Well, I mean, if they know it,
Yeah.
but that's
I don't think he has to do anything with him agreeing with it. He just didn't want his stuff to burn down.
I think that's what they're all doing.
And that's fine. And that's fine. And it worked though. And that's all that matters. And at the end of the day, his business is booming right now. So look, it's putting more money in the hands of a black business, and he's gonna take that home to his black family. So it still worked out in the end. Like the ends justify the means to me in most situations. Not all of them, but in most situations.
Inclusion is only a problem when black people practice it. It's the only problem when black people practice it. So with that said,
For real.
and let you guys go and enjoy the rest of the evening. Appreciate you coming in last minute for me. Appreciate you, HJ. I hope you feel better, bro, for real.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Bros, basic training. Glad to see
Haven't seen you in a while, man.
I know. Glad to see you out there moving to Georgia. I need to come because I come out there to Georgia all the time. So now that I know you're there, I need to come get you.
Man, come on.
Y'all get done with y'all bullshit out there. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Man, I don't know. It's about to be a lot of work this political season. The numbers that I looked at recently, Joe Biden is looking very good in our state, and that's
Creepy Joe.
Yeah.
we ain't even talking about all his history.
Creepy Joe.
And he's more racist than Donald Trump.
I can't tell you. When he said that shit, like I had to run that shit close to my head. I couldn't believe Nick said that shit. Like I couldn't you know how you walk to somebody and you double back, you like he didn't say that shit. Like
I talked to so many black people who say, you know what, Dante, I don't even care that he said that. Donald Trump he said he'll grab a woman by his vagina. I'm like, whoa. Joe Biden just looked at you and said that you don't have the intelligence to choose who you want to run, choose who you want to vote for president, regardless if that's a Republican, Libertarian, Green Party. He said that you aren't smart enough to make your own decision. And if you don't vote for him, then you're not black. Well, black people are not linear thinkers.
Like you heard.
I feel you. I still think, perpetuating rape culture is a little bit more of a slippery slope than calling people stupid. But if we're gonna compare the two, I'm definitely gonna say what Donald Trump said was just It's way worse, man. Way worse. It is what it is. Like,
Well, I don't know, man. What Donald Trump said was very typical to how actual manly men talk. Like, if you wouldn't on this call, for instance, if we were just sitting around talking, we do talk like that. You know, that's how we talk. It's
I
not
don't
the
know.
fact that
Like,
he
if
raped
you're gonna
somebody.
insist that you rapey, that's on you. But I don't.
Is that
I'm not
rape?
gonna brush that off his. Yeah.
And she allows it.
No. The context.
But there was
you
no
mustn't understand.
context of we're in an intimate situation. Like, he literally
No.
said, go right up to him and grab him by the. That's not. Where's the consent?
He was explaining his relationship with groupies and how they just run after people like him. That's with status. And he's like, they just
Don't
fall
matter.
off. You could just grab them by the pussy.
But I mean, I get it, but you still, I mean, they still give consent to grab pussy just because I like you and I'm all over.
Exactly. Like,
You know what I'm
that's
saying? Like, you know what I'm
still
saying?
rapey, bro. Period.
I get what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Some groups, some men may be okay with that, but on a massive scale, like I can't be like, oh, I'm fucking with you. I like you and all of you. Like, well, shit, let me feel that thing. I'm like, whoa, man. Like, I ain't, you know, that wasn't a green light. Like, you know, just because I grabbed your brush your arm, don't mean I say, you know, hey, funnel the double tap the mouse, man.
Well, he didn't say you go grab him by the pussy. He was insinuating that you could because they falling over you like that. He didn't say, yeah, just get out there and grab you some pussy. Nah, that's not what
Well,
happened.
still, if a person is showing interest in you, that still don't give you the right to sexually assault them. Like, you're not gonna never get me to agree with that. That's I wouldn't give my son no advice like that. I would never tell my daughter that was cool. Like, nah, I'm good.
Well, of course,
It's always gonna be
you're a
worse.
lady. You're a
But
woman.
still, that means absolutely nothing. Like, are we saying that all men think the same? Are we doing that?
No, what I'm saying is this is how men talk, though. It's called locker room talk. That's what we do.
Nah.
Because I don't agree with it, but I probably would have said something like that in a joke or me and my nephew talk like this all the time. That don't mean that I would ever disrespect a woman or anything like that. That ain't even me. But it's just how men talk, and that's really all
And
that
some men
was.
exaggerate their stories too.
We all do, bro. Let's keep it. You know what I'm saying? You know, even if we talk about how we done dealt with a girl, we be like, man, you know, like we really beat it up a lot worse than, you know, but we really ain't do nothing. That's just us, you know. When it comes to those type of conversations, we do it. I do. I ain't gonna lie.
Hey, honesty is the best policy. I gotta let you have that one. I can't argue. I can't argue with it, you know?
Man, so
I ain't there for those conversations, so I just gotta concede as far as that's concerned.
I hope y'all have a good night. I'm gonna go ahead and end it, man.
All right,
All right,
y'all
bro.
stay safe.
All right, y'all.
Adios.
All right.